Stop hitting me in the head. Ah! Will you stop? Hey friends, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are on the final iteration of my Reader's Guide to Fantasy Romance, and today we are talking about high or epic fantasy. After this, we will have a vlog, I think it's next Monday, where I'll be reading all of these books. But for now, we're going to kind of orient this exactly the same way as the previous iterations. So we're going to go through what is high fantasy, some recommendations, and then a try chapter. So let's get right into it. What is high and or epic fantasy? So this genre, fantasy umbrella, can be called either high or epic fantasy. Some people will differentiate them, but most of the time they are pretty interchangeable. So high or epic fantasy is something that is set outside of our world, and it usually follows the journey of our hero. So you are watching good overcome evil. There are obviously examples that go outside of this. Often those are classified into dark fantasy. Usually in this genre, we are following an epic hero doing epic things. But the overarching themes of this are that it is set in a fantastical world that looks entirely different than ours. It follows fantastical beings or creatures who usually have fantastical abilities. So that is kind of what high and epic fantasy is. It is essentially the opposite of low fantasy, where low fantasy is set in our world. This is set in a different world. There are some cases of this that do overlap with low fantasy, and we are going to talk a little bit about that, and that would be portal fantasy. So portal fantasies tend to kind of be the go-between between low and high fantasy. So they are fantasy stories that actually start or take place at some point in the real world, and you cross into a fantastical world. This is seen in classic things like Alice in Wonderland and the Chronicles of Narnia and His Dark Materials, where a character starts in a realistic world and they end up going to some sort of fantastical realm. So these types of fantasies can be usually classified in either or. A lot of times it will kind of be like, how much do you spend in that fantastical world? But it's totally going to depend on the reader, the reviewer, for where they want to classify that. So I am going to have a couple of portal fantasies on here. I'm going to have some strict high fantasies on here, but the thing that all of these have in common is that this has a setting that is totally unlike our own. Let's just get right into the recommendations. So let's kick it off with the portal fantasies. I feel like that makes the most sense. So the first one that I have is Fate of Wrath and Flame series by K.A. Tucker. This is a ongoing series. So right now there are 2 books released. Book 3 does release later this year. But in this, we are following our heroine who starts in the human world. It is our world. And she does not believe in any sort of magical beings. Her father is homeless and she believes that he had some sort of psychotic episode, and now he thinks that demons and other gods and beings are real. She doesn't believe him, no one believes him. And right at the beginning of this book, something happens to her and she comes across this woman, and this woman ends up sending her into a fantastical world. And now she has to survive and possibly do these gods bidding. I ended up putting this one here because the majority of this series does take place in the fantasy world. We only get a couple of chapters right at the beginning where our heroine is in our world, and once she goes to the fantasy world, she isn't able to return to the human realm. So this is mostly high epic fantasy, and it is her trying to work with the prince and possibly overtake the evil gods. And this is one of my favorite fantasies at this point. I am completely obsessed with the series. I've given both of these books 5 stars. I think the world building is amazing. I love the characters. I love the romance. I just really, really love this fantasy. I just think it is really underread and underhyped. So if you are into fantasy romance, I highly recommend giving this one a read. And then the last portal fantasy I want to recommend is the Never King series by Nikki St. Crow. So we are following our heroine who is in our world, and she believes that her family has a long history, I think it's of schizophrenia, because at a certain age they start to believe that there is some sort of mythical being after them, and they call him Peter Pan. And she is coming up on her, I think it's 18th birthday, and everyone in her family, their mental health has started to degrade after the age of 18. And so she feels like she is running out of time. and she is trying to take care of her mother. And on her 18th birthday, Peter Pan actually shows up and she realizes they are suffering from an actual Peter Pan. And she is taken to Neverland. And there she meets Peter and the Lost Boys, and she learns what has actually happened to her family across all the generations. And this is a Why Choose romance, and it is over the top and ridiculous and such a good time. And I absolutely love the series. The fourth and final book, I believe, comes out this year. So it's the perfect time to binge the series if you haven't already. And then I have three high fantasy, epic fantasy stories that I want to recommend. First is one that I just read earlier this year and I'm obsessed with it, and that is Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is the epitome of high fantasy. We have a talking sword, or the embodiment of a sword. We have our heroine who lives in this fantastical realm, and her late husband's family is trying to steal her inheritance. And her and this magical sword end up going on an epic adventure to try and save her inheritance and get her out from underneath her in-laws' thumb. And it has a really, really sweet romance between the sword and our heroine. So if you really love a good epic travel fantasy, this is a great one to give a try. Then we have a Kingdom of Stars series. I'm totally blanking on the name. Is it like the Stars and Shadow series? But there are two books that are currently out, and book three comes out again later this year. But this is very much so in the vein of like the current high fantasy trend, where you have a heroine without a lot of agency, and she is being sent off to marry this king. And along the way, she ends up meeting this dark guard. She thinks that he's the evil guy and that her prince might be the good guy. Turns out that the prince is evil. There's an epic enemies to lovers romance, forbidden romance. There are vampires, there are fae, there are all of the things that you know and love in this. And even though this is super tropey and super familiar, it is so bingeable and enjoyable, and you can't help but get sucked into this world and these characters and this romance. So if you are really into that current trend right now, I really recommend giving those one a read. And then lastly, the light-hearted take on this sort of epic high fantasy is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. This is a multi-book series as well, but all of these can be read as standalones, which I really do like. And this is a very light-hearted take on this sort of epic fantasy. So we are set in a kind of medieval-esque fantasy world, and our heroine thinks that demons are evil, and one day she accidentally saves a demon, and she learns that the god that she, or the goddess that she thought was protecting the kingdom, is actually the bad guy, and she needs to team up with this demon in order to take down the evil goddess. It is the perfect like good versus evil, but it's so funny and so lighthearted and so sweet, and you have a really great band of demons, unlikely allies thing going on, and it is fantastic. I loved the romance in here. Our hero is a dragon, and he just wants to protect our heroine, and our heroine just wants to get back to her normal life. She is a somewhat reluctant hero because she doesn't know if she buys into any of this, but she's being roped into saving the kingdom, even though that is not at all what she wanted to do. I really love the rest of the series, and Kimberly Lemming did announce that we are getting another book in this world, and I absolutely can't wait. So that is it for the recommendations for this one. I will say that this is probably my least read fantasy subgenre. I am not the biggest high or epic fantasy reader, partly because I love romance so much, and while there are plenty of romances set in this world, they tend to be heavier on the fantasy elements, and I prefer the romance elements to the fantasy elements. And because of that, I tend to lean more towards low fantasy, because you don't need to spend that time building the world and the magic systems and all of the things. But every reader has their preferences. So you just kind of need to try some things out, figure out what you like. Do you want a lot of rules for your magic? Do you want a lot of world building? All of these things. And you can kind of figure out where in the fantasy umbrella you fall. Like I said, I tend to fall more on the low fantasy. I want the romance and I want the intrigue, but I don't necessarily need the rules and the logic and the world building. I don't care that much about that. I'm here for the romance. So getting into my own TBR, I have 5 high fantasy romances that I'm super interested in giving a try. I'm pretty sure that all of these are high fantasy. Some of them I haven't read the synopses for because a couple of them either have really vague synopses or I've been recommended them and told not to read the synopses. So, if any of these are not high fantasy, I have some other options that I can add in here, but I'm fairly certain that all of these are high fantasy. So the first one is Vicious Bonds by Shanora Williams. This is a fantasy series I've had on my radar for quite a while, and I've been seeing this going around on Instagram, and then this cover came out and the author released a bunch of tropes and things, and so I've been really interested in giving this one a read. I'm fairly certain that this is high fantasy. It says, I was dropped from the sky into a haunting forest. So I'm pretty sure. It says the ruler of Blackwater, which is obviously not a real thing. So I'm pretty sure that this is a high fantasy. All I know about it is that it is a dark fantasy romance, and then the tropes. Fated mates, enemies to lovers, touch her and die, and then there's a mafia vibe to this. So I'm very interested in giving this one a read. Then we have Silk and Steel by Ariana Nash. This is a 4-book series, I believe, and this is one that I got recommended by somebody. If it was you, let me know. I had asked for some recommendations a while back, and I don't remember even what I was asking recommendations for, but I've had them like sitting in a Kindle, like a KU list for so long. But it says a tormented dragon prince, a captured elven assassin. Duty demands they fight for their people, but love has other plans. A gay dragon shifter and a bisexual elf. You know what? It sounds great. I'm here for it. And especially if it gets its own HEA at the end. I love when fantasy series do that. I don't care if there's like an overarching plot throughout all 4 of them, but I much prefer getting my couple at the end. Then we have Evil Twin by Katie Wilde. And this is the one that I don't know the synopsis for because I've been told not to read the synopsis. This has a crown on the cover, and I feel like it's probably going to be a high fantasy story based off of this. That's at the bottom of like the Kindle description. So that's all I know about it is that little image. And that leads me to believe that it's going to be high fantasy. So we're going to roll with it. And again, if it's not high fantasy, we will pick something else. Next up is Leviathan Song by Elsie Winters, which is a book that has been on my TBR for what feels like forever. And this is a romance between a elf and a merman. And it says, as an elven weaponsmith, Ilara is an expert in crafting beautiful, deadly things. When an underwater city known as the Deep sends for her help, she's determined to answer the call. But between murderous gangsters and razor-sharp foreign politics, Ilara is ill-equipped to handle the situation. Our hero is a half-merman, all brooding, sardonic wit. Landlocked, jaded, and rejected by his people, the last thing he wants to do is get involved in underwater affairs. But soft-hearted, strong-willed Ilara is the temptation he can't resist. But if he isn't careful, playing brooding bodyguard could turn into something much more. I absolutely love that. It sounds amazing. I have heard nothing but good things about this. I know that Heather from Hia Booktubes absolutely loves this book, and so I'm very excited to give this one a read. And then the final book that I have is the only trade published book on here, and that is an arc for The Foxglove King by Hannah Whiten. I have had this author on my radar forever, and I was originally going to pick up her for the Wolf series, but I know that one leaned more fantasy, and this one is being pitched as romance fantasy. So it says that it is a lush romantic epic fantasy. A young woman's secret power to raise the dead plunges her into the dangerous and glamorous world of the Sainted King's royal court. That's all I know about it. This cover is honestly what pulled me in. I'm very excited to give this one a try. Those are the 5 that we're going to give a read. So I am, again, just going to go in that order. So I'm going to go get my Kindle because it is still upstairs. And we're going to give all 5 of these a try, rank them, and wrap up the series. Okay, so we are going to kick it off with Vicious Bonds by Shanora Williams. I have not only Ellie, but I also have Maggie over here being absolutely crazy. So hopefully this goes all right. But yeah, we're going to kick it off with Vicious Bonds by Shanora Williams, so I will be right back.
I lose my breath whenever I see you. You stole my heart.
Oh dear. Okay. So I just finished the first chapter of Vicious Bonds by Shanora Williams. Really quick, massive trigger warning for suicide. So you might want to skip this. This first chapter is only like 2-3 pages, but the entire first chapter is our main character Kaz, who I assume is our hero, who is contemplating suicide. It is pretty intense, actually. It is him lying in bed thinking about how the world would be better off without him and holding onto his gun. He hears this like whispering voice that says like, why do I have to do this on my own? He kind of like snaps out of it, and that is the end of chapter 1. Like I said, it was very intense. I was not expecting that, so I don't have a whole lot to go off of with this, but yeah, it was definitely very intense. So major content warnings for this one. Next, I am going to go into Silk and Steel by Ariana Nash. So I'm going to go find that on my Kindle, and I'll be right back.
You do. My life was great till you added colors. Like the moon needs the sun, we don't care about the others.
Okay, so I just finished the first chapter of Silk and Steel by Ariana Nash, and this was another really short one, but in this one, we are following our hero who is an elf, and he has been captured after a big battle, and he is sitting in a cell, and a dragon comes to him and is like brought him food and is trying to get him to answer some questions. You know, is he the only elf? Why was he here? All of these things. And our elf is not speaking to him. And right at the end, he asks the dragon's name, and I assume that dragon is our other hero. Didn't get a lot from that one, but the world does seem very interesting. I've never really read a world that is a battle between elves and dragons. That is definitely a new one for me. So I am intrigued by it. And I'm also intrigued by the fact that this does have the happily ever after in this book. So next we're going to go into Evil Twin by Katie Wilde. So this is the one that's been recommended to me a whole bunch, and of course my Kindle isn't working again. Very excited for this one because I have no idea what to expect. So I'm going to restart my Kindle, hopefully get this thing to work, and then I will come back to you in just a little bit.
You set my world on fire. You're my heart's desire.
So I just finished the first chapter of Evil, is it Evil Queen? Evil Twin by Katie Wilde. And this is wild. I loved this. So this opens up with our hero, who is the like second born twin. Even though him and his twin are 4 seconds apart, the older twin is like the heir to the throne, and he is the worst. Their kingdom ends up saving like a kingdom near them, and our hero Bane is the one that actually like did the saving, and his brother is the one that is like getting the reward, and he is offered to marry the princess of the other kingdom. And our hero has had enough. He wants his brother to die, but he made a vow that he would never kill his twin brother. And so he decides to take matters into his own hands, and instead he is going to woo the princess, and he's going to bed her and make sure that everyone like catches them in the act, so that the two of them need to marry. And so he like follows her, and she shows up at his twin brother's bed, and so he goes there, and he realizes that she is not vapid at all, and she wants to overthrow her parents. And so the two of them agree to get caught. They can unite the kingdoms themselves, and it seems fantastic. I loved it. This is definitely in the running for one that I want to read. It's also super short, which I love. I get why everyone loves this. I'm excited to give this one a read. Next, we're going to go into Leviathan Song by Elsie Winters. So I'm going to go give that one a read. Hopefully my Kindle doesn't crap out. For whatever reason, my Kindle keeps like glitching, and I don't know why. So hopefully I don't need to get a new one.
Wanna love you, just wanna hold you, just wanna be with you till we grow old. Please tell me you'll stay or take me away. I want you for myself every single day. You said
Okay, so I just finished the first chapter of Leviathan Song by Elsie Winters, and apparently this is a portal fantasy. I did not know that. So our heroine owns a shop in Seattle, and it is kind of like a crossroads to the Boundlands, and she is on her way back to the Boundlands, and she comes across this guy who is playing like a guitar on the side of the street, and she realizes that he is exuding magical abilities. She has the ability to sense other people's magical abilities. And so she stops because she realizes all these humans are like enthralled by him, and she can feel that his like singing his song is like entrancing. And so she's very confused because the only people that have this ability are mermaids, and he is obviously not a mermaid, and sirens are exclusively women. And so she's very confused by this. So she waits until he's done and starts talking to him. And the two of them get off on a very like bad footing, because he sees her as being snobby and she wants to understand what he's doing and who he is. And so they go their separate ways at the end of chapter 1. So it was very interesting. I love this world, so I'm excited to give this one a read. And then we're going to try out the final one, which is The Foxglove King. So I'm going to go find that one, give that one a read, and then we can rank all of these books.
I don't know what I'd do without you. You make me smile. What is it that you do? My life was.
So I just finished the first chapter of The Foxglove King by Hannah Whiten, and did I understand anything that happened to that first chapter? No, I did not. Um, I'm very confused by this. We open up with our heroine, Lore, and Lore can sense mortem, which is this like thing inside of you that is like the catalyst for death or something. It's this like essence inside of you, and when you die, it's activated, and you can extend your life by being poisoned by foxglove. And essentially, you activate that mortem a little bit, and you can add onto your life. And our heroine can sense it, and she is like undercover because there are poison runners, which I assume are like drug cartel sort of deals. Um, and she's undercover with this guy, Michael, because her boss, Val, has her like spying on him. And so she's been living with him for a year and she's trying to like spy on him. And I didn't really understand. I don't understand the underworkings. There's some sort of consecration thing that's going to happen. I don't know who our hero is. I don't know. I was very confused. Let's just go through the ranking really quick. So in the 5th spot, I'm putting Foxglove King just because I didn't understand. The writing felt very like, it felt very fantasy-esque. Like it was very intense fantasy world building, and it just I was confused. I was very confused. And I'm sure like once I got into this, like it will make more sense. But that first chapter just had my brain hurting a little bit. In the 4th spot, I'm putting Vicious Bonds, not for any reason other than this was so short that I didn't really get a good feel for what this was about. It was only 2 pages. So in the number 3 spot is Leviathan's Song by Elsie Winters. I do really want to read this one, but that first chapter was just like an intro to the character. In the number 2 spot, I put Silk and Steel by Ariana Nash. The idea of like an elf dragon thing was very fascinating to me, and the dragon in here was really interesting, and I want to continue on. But in the number 1 spot, I had to put Evil Twin by Katie Wilde because that first chapter was so good and I need to know where this story goes, and so I desperately want to read this one. So here is the final 4 books that I'm going to be reading for the vlog that is coming, I believe, next week, Monday. So we have Haunted by Christina C. Jones, Eden by Lily Mayne, Galen by Jacqueline Osborne, and then Evil Twin by Katie Wilde, and I'm so excited to give all of these a read. So thank you guys so much for watching this whole series. I hope you enjoyed this series, and then the final vlog where I read these, like I said, will be coming really, really soon. Let me know if you agree with my rankings. Let me know if there was a book in here that you wish I had read instead, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.